Imagine this. You're sitting in a quiet room. Everything around you is calm, maybe even too calm. The world expects you to be at peace, to smile, to stay composed. But somewhere beneath that surface, behind the practiced politeness and the curated emotional stability, something is coiled tight. You don't speak of it. You don't even look at it. But it's there growing, muttering in a voice that sounds almost like your own. It's not fear. It's not sadness. It's anger. And you've been taught to be afraid of it. From childhood, you learned that anger is dangerous. It destroys relationships, clouds judgment, makes monsters out of men. So you buried it. You called it being mature, staying calm, rising above. But what if that burial wasn't an act of strength, but of self-abandonment? What if anger isn't the enemy? What if the very emotion you've spent years suppressing holds a key to your transformation? A force not to be feared, but to be understood, integrated, and even embraced? Let that question hang in the air for a moment. Because this is where this illusion starts to fracture down see. We live in a world that praises passivity and asks this peace. We're told that good people don't get angry, that anger is unspiritual, unproductive, uncivilized. We're taught to avoid conflict, to play nice, to forgive, without processing, to stay silent in the name of harmony. But harmony without truth is a beautiful form of self-betrayal. You've likely been angry before, not in the explosive, dramatic Hollywood sense, but in the quiet, suffocating way that hides behind tight smiles and strained eyes. The boss who belittles you, the friend who takes but never gives, the parent who never saw you. The moment you didn't speak up, the whole body screamed, "Enough!" That wasn't weakness. That wasn't overreaction. That was anger trying to tell you something. But instead of listening, you swallowed it. Again and again, until your boundaries blurred, your confidence eroded, and your sense of self began to dissolve. You told yourself you were being the bigger person, but deep down, a part of you whispered, "You are disappearing, God." So let's ask a dangerous question. What if anger is not a threat to your growth, but the very signal of your unmet needs, your suppressed truths, your violated values? What if anger is not a fire meant to burn everything down, but a fire meant to burn everything false away? Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And perhaps anger is one of the most misunderstood shadows of them all. Because what is anger, really? It is energy. It is awareness. It is life force calling for alignment. Behind every authentic surge of anger lies a message. Something needs to change. Something isn't right. Something inside you is still alive and unwilling to be silenced. And yet, modern culture has twisted this message into pathology. We medicate it, suppress it, guilt-trip it, or turn it inward until it festers into anxiety, depression, or chronic fatigue. The very emotion designed to alert and protect is rebranded as a flaw. But consider this. What if the root of much of your anxiety is anger you've never allowed yourself to feel? What if the reason you can't say no is because you've never honored the anger that rises when you're crossed? What if your people-pleasing, your burnout, your sense of being stuck isn't a personality trait, but the residue of unprocessed rage? Can you begin to see the paradox? The very emotion we fear may be the compass we need. The very force we suppress may be the fuel for our awakening. The part of us we're told to hide may be the part that's most honest. But if that's true, what does it mean for how you've lived your life? How many boundaries you've betrayed? How many truths you've swallowed? How many dreams you've delayed, all in the name of being nice? And the deeper question, if you keep avoiding your anger, who exactly are you becoming? There's a cost to silence, a cost to suppression, a cost to being endlessly pleasant in a world that often profits from your compliance. And maybe, just maybe, anger is not the thing that will break you, but the thing that will finally set you free. Not through destruction, but through awakening Dot, because the real danger is not in anger itself, but in never learning how to hear what it's trying to say, Dot. So, what is it trying to say? And why have we been taught never to listen? Let's find out. Anger, in its rawest form, is not chaos. It is clarity. Yet clarity, when it threatens comfort, conformity, or control, is almost always labeled dangerous. Dot. To understand the distortion of anger, we must first understand the forces that fuel it into silence. From the moment you're born, the world begins shaping you into what it needs, not necessarily what you are. Parents want obedience. Schools want order. Society wants predictability. So, step by step, you're conditioned to make peace with being unseen, unheard, and unexpressed. As long as it keeps things running smoothly. Dot. By age 5, you've likely already been punished for expressing anger. Not guided, not helped, punished. You learn that to be loved, you must not disrupt. You must not raise your voice. You must not reject what is offered, even if it violates you. This is not parenting, it's programming, and that programming has consequences. Carl Jung argued that every personality contains a shadow, the unconscious parts of ourselves that we reject or repress. The more unacceptable the trait, the deeper we bury it. In modern society, anger, especially if you're a woman, a child, or respectable adult, is one of the first traits to be locked away. Dot. So what happens when anger becomes shadow? It doesn't disappear. It mutates. Dot. It becomes resentment, that it becomes passive-aggression, that it becomes internalized, self-hatred. Dot. It becomes emotional dissassa, iation. Dot. It becomes the inability to say no, even when your soul is screaming it. Dot. It becomes depression that whispers, there's no point, just survive. This is not accidental. The disempowerment of your anger serves a system that thrives when individuals are disconnected from their inner fire. Thinkers like Aldous Huxley and Michel Foucault recognized this long ago. Modern society doesn't just control through force. It controls through internalized self-regulation. You're not being beaten into submission. You're being socialized into it, taught to feel guilty for your own healthy boundaries, taught to call your fire toxicity instead of truth. Anger, at its core, is your nervous system saying, something is wrong. I will not accept this. But we live in a culture where not accepting what is, especially if it disrupts the hierarchy, is taboo. Dot. In his work on trauma and addiction, Dr. Gabor Maté writes that one of the most common traits among chronically ill or emotionally lost individuals is the suppression of authentic emotion, especially anger. He argues that emotional repression is not just psychologically damaging, it is physiologically toxic. When you don't allow yourself to feel anger, your immune system weakens, your stress hormones rise, your boundaries blur, the body keeps the score, and the score reads, you have silenced yourself too long. Nietzsche once wrote, he who cannot command himself must obey. But there's a darker implication here. He who cannot own his rage must serve the world that benefits from his silence. Your anger was never meant to be eradicated. It was meant to be disciplined, not through suppression, but through integration. Consider this. The philosopher Aristotle did not condemn anger. He saw it as essential to virtue. He wrote, anybody can become angry, that is easy, but to be angry with the right person, and to the right degree, and at the right time, and for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not within everybody's power. This is not dismissal. It is mastery. But where were you taught mastery of anger? In school, where you were told to sit down, shut up, and comply? In your family, where silence was safety and disagreement meant danger? In religion, where wrath was sin and forgiveness the only virtue. We are taught to spiritualize away anger instead of decoding it, to rise above instead of going within. But if the house is on fire and you smell smoke, do you meditate? The sensation away, or do you run toward the flame and understand what caused it? Most people never make that run. They live entire lives with unprocessed anger fossilized in their chest, whispering in their relationships, echoing in their choices, controlling them from the shadows. They become the nice guy who explodes once every 5 years, the perfect daughter who drinks to numb the ache, the stoic achiever who slowly implodes into burnout dot, and all the while, they think they are the problem, that their rage is a flaw, not a flag. But the truth is this: your anger has never been the enemy. The real enemy is the belief that to feel it is to become bad, broken, or dangerous. That belief is the cage asterisk. So who built the cage? Was it the scared parent who couldn't handle your voice? The school that needed you docile to survive the system? The social norms that punish defiance and reward submission? The answer is all of them, but also none of them. Because once you see the mechanism, it becomes your responsibility to deconstruct it. You can't grow while fearing your own power. You can't heal while denying what hurts. You can't transform while exiling the very part of you that knows how. To say no more. There's a reason so many spiritual and psychological traditions talk about the inner fire. It's not just metaphor. It is literal. Your transformation begins not when you feel safe, but when you allow yourself to feel fully rage and all. Anger doesn't make you less evolved. God, it means something in you still remembers how to fight for your soul. And now that you've heard it, truly heard it, the question becomes, what happens when you keep ignoring that voice? What is this unprocessed anger actually doing to your life right now without you even realizing it? We're about to find out. You wake up exhausted, not just physically, but existentially. There's no crisis, no visible wound, no dramatic tragedy to point to. Yet something in you feels off, dimmed, distant, like you're living your life with the volume turned down. You brush your teeth, you check your phone, you answer emails, you smile at strangers, and deep down you wonder, is this it? It's easy to blame the world for this numbness: capitalism, social media, inflation, endless obligations. But there's something deeper lurking beneath that fatigue, a hidden fracture, a psychic tension. That tension is the result of silenced fire, of anger turned inward. Let's make something brutally clear. What you suppress does not die, not in F-E, S-T-E-R-S, not it leaks and redirects itself in ways you can't see until the damage is done. And nowhere is this more insidious than with anger. Because when you are not allowed to direct your rage outward, when society trains you to never yell, never argue, never push back, you begin to internalize the conflict. You turn your frustration against yourself, not as a choice, but as a survival strategy. You learn to mask the feeling with productivity. You drown it in distraction scrolling, streaming, shopping. You turn it into shame. Why am I still not happy? You call it depression, but depression is often anger without permission. Anger, when unacknowledged, doesn't just harm your mental health, it warps your identity. You begin to forget who you are, Doc. Why? Because you no longer trust your own emotional compass. If every time you felt mistreated, you told yourself to stay calm, be grateful, or let it go, you eventually start ignoring your own pain. And when pain is invalidated repeatedly, you begin to doubt your perception of reality. This is how people become hollow. They lose the signal between inner truth and outer behavior. They become what Carl Jung called persona unmasked, outwardly, functional, inwardly fractured. And here's the terrifying part. This suppression is not just personal. It's systemic. Modern society has created a psychological architecture that thrives on your disconnection from anger. Because anger, when honored, leads to boundaries. And boundaries challenge exploitation. Anger leads to rebellion, and rebellion disrupts profit. Anger leads to authenticity. And authenticity cannot be mass-produced. That's why every force, from childhood to media to corporate culture, tries to domesticate your emotional range, to take your anger and sterilize it into silence. We reward the agreeable employee. We admire the chill partner. We pedestal the selfless friend who never says no. But what are we really praising? Compliance, emotional muting, the performance of peace at the cost of truth. In this emotional economy, anger becomes not just taboo, it becomes invisible. Even to you, this is how anger disguises itself. As burnout, you can't explain it. Chronic fatigue, the doctors can't diagnose as irritability. You blame caffeine withdrawal. Anxiety that spikes when you think about saying what you really feel as. Perfectionism that masks the rage of never being enough as detachment from your own needs. Dreams and voice anger, suppressed long enough, turns into what Viktor Frankl called the existential vacuum, a life devoid of meaning. Not because meaning is absent, but because your emotional instrument is so out of tune, you can no longer feel where your soul wants to go. And there's another consequence, one even darker. When anger is denied healthy expression, it doesn't just implode, it eventually explodes. You snap at your partner for something trivial. You ghost a friend instead of being honest, but you quit your job without warning. You lash out at yourself in silent, destructive ways, binging, isolating, sabotaging your success. Why? Because anger will find a voice, if not through words, then through wounds. There's a reason that Greek tragedies were filled with suppressed fury. Rage is not just a passing feeling. It is a mythic force. Repressed, it becomes vengeful, not just toward others, but toward the self. This is what Dostoevsky understood so well. That man is not destroyed by evil from without, but by silence from within. That the worst kind of suffering is not oppression. It's the inability to speak truth to oneself. And truth, more often than not, begins with the recognition, I am angry, not because I am broken, but because something in me still remembers that I was not made to be stepped on, silenced, or swallowed by a world that demands my obedience at the cost of my soul. How much of your claim is shaped not by joy, but by quiet rage? How many relationships have you stayed in out of fear and conflict? How many job roles, conversations, and self-betrayals have you endured to avoid making a scene? How many times have you smiled when you wanted to scream? The consequences are not just emotional, they're spiritual. You cannot lose your life all at once. You lose it one swallow, truth at a time. And maybe that's the most haunting realization of all, that your suffering was never caused by too much anger, but by not enough of the right kind. Not the destructive kind, but the holy kind, the boundary setting, lie exposing, soul defending kind, the kind that says, I am not here to be agreeable, I am here to be real. But to reclaim that kind of anger, to let it empower rather than consume, you must be willing to turn and face it. Not run, not rationalize, but look it in the eyes and say, I'm listening. Because once you stop fearing your anger, it stops trying to punish you. And instead, it becomes a guide. So the question now is no longer, what is my anger doing to me? It becomes, what can I do with it now that I see it clearly? And the answer is where the rebellion begins. Asterisk, you can feel it now, can't you? That subtle current beneath your skin, that tight coil in your gut, that buried no rising like heat behind your chest. That's not dysfunction. That's your awakening. Anger - real righteous. Rooted in truth is the part of you that never forgot what you deserve. So what do you do now? You rebel. But not the way they told you rebellion looks. This is not chaos, not destruction, not tantrums. This is the sacred rebellion of coming home to yourself. It begins with the smallest, most powerful act. You stop apologizing for being angry. You stop seeing your fire as a flaw. You stop silencing the part of you that says, "This is not okay." You stop plastering peace over pain and calling it maturity. Because peace that requires your erasure is not peace. It's submission, and you were not born for submission. First step to reclaiming anger is permission. You give yourself permission to feel it, fully, without justification, without apology, without dressing it up to make others comfortable. You let the volcano speak. You don't act it out. You listen. This is not indulgence. This is integration. What Carl Jung called shadow work, the conscious confrontation with your own unconscious, the process of making what was hidden visible, and it's terrifying. Because for many, their anger is not just personal, it's generational. You're not just breaking your silence, you're breaking the code of a family, of a culture, of a system. That said, don't speak, don't fight, don't burn, but you must burn. Not destructively transformative lie. Do you remember the story of the phoenix? It does not die quietly. It erupts into flames. And from the ashes, something new is born. This is your rebellion, to burn what no longer serves you. Burn the conditioning that says pleasing others is your worth. Burn the false humility that hides your fury under fake smiles. Burn the spiritual bypassing that tells you to love and light your way out of injustice. Burn the guilt that says to defend yourself is selfish. This is not rage for rage's sake. This is holy defiance. Because here's the deeper truth. When you stop running from your anger, it transforms. Anger that is heard becomes assertiveness. Anger that is understood becomes clarity. Anger that is expressed becomes action. Anger that is accepted becomes power. Look at the world's great change makers. They weren't calm. They were on fire. Martin Luther King Jr. wasn't passive. He was furious at injustice. Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz and still spoke of the will to meaning, not because he never felt rage, but because he channeled it. Malcolm X, Bell Hooks, James Baldwin, they wielded anger as intellect, as truth, as fuel. Even the Buddha didn't transcend suffering by ignoring it. He sat with it until it transformed. Real power is not the absence of emotion. It is the alchemy of it. So how do you turn your anger into alchemy? You stop treating it like a bomb and start treating it like a compass. Ask yourself, what is my anger trying to protect? What boundary was violated when this emotion arose? Where have I swallowed my voice to keep the peace, and at what cost? What injustice am I tolerating because I fear conflict more than I value truth? Then speak, not to wound, but to reclaim. Set a boundary. Say no without explanation. Express disappointment. Disagree loudly. Leave the room. End the conversation. Break the silence you are never meant to live in. It will feel wrong at first, even dangerous, because your nervous system has been wired for compliance, not confrontation. But every time you choose truth over comfort, your nervous system recalibrates. That trembling, that shaking in your voice, that anxiety after speaking your truth, that's not weakness, that's freedom being born. This rebellion also requires a new relationship with forgiveness. The kind that demands you suppress your pain for someone else's comfort, not the kind that forces you to forget in order to move on, but the kind that allows you to feel everything: rage, grief, betrayal, and still choose healing over hatred. Forgiveness, in this light, becomes a byproduct of fully processed anger, not a shortcut around it. Because only when you have fully honored your pain can you release it without abandoning yourself. This is what many don't understand. True. Healing isn't about letting go. It's about holding on long enough to understand why it hurts. Only then can you let go without self-betrayal. In the end, rebellion is not about fighting the world. It's about fighting for your soul. And when you do, when you begin to honor your anger, listen to it, move with it, instead of against it, you will feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Wholeness. Because anger is not a demon to be exorcised. It's a lost guardian, waiting to return to its rightful place. A sentinel of your boundaries, protector of your values, a roaring echo of your unmet needs. And once you allow it in not to dominate, but to guide you, you'll begin to feel the ground beneath you shift. You will speak more clearly. You will love more fiercely. You will say no more easily. You will walk into rooms with your whole self, not just the digestible parts. You will stop pretending to be okay when you're not. And you will stop apologizing for taking up space. Because the revolution isn't loud. It's honest. And honesty, fueled by sacred anger, is the beginning of freedom. So now, after all this, comes the final question. If anger is not your enemy, if it is your compass, your fuel, your call to power, then what is the ultimate truth hiding at the heart of it all? What sacred secret is your rage trying to lead you to? Equals at the end of all this, after the breakdown, the burn, the rebellion, you stand alone. In silence, the storm is past. The fire has cooled, and you are left with a strange kind of emptiness. Not the numb kind, but a pregnant stillness, as if the ground itself is waiting for something to be born. And then the truth begins to surface, not in words, but in a deep, cellular knowing. You were never broken. You were just angry because your soul remembered something that the world wanted you to forget, that you were born with dignity, that your feelings were meant to be felt, that your voice mattered before you learned to measure it, that your spirit knew how to say no before it was taught to say yes to survive. The ultimate truth is this: your anger was never the poison. Your silence was. You see it now, don't you? Anger, true anger, is not destructive by nature. It is revelatory. It shows you where you end and others begin. It burns illusions. It exposes where you've lied to yourself to make others comfortable. It unearths the buried self. This is why the most dangerous people in society are not the ones who feel too much anger, but those who feel none at all. Because to feel no anger is to feel no injustice. Not to feel no anger is to allow the unacceptable to go unchallenged. To feel no anger is to be dead while still breathing. You are not here to die with your truth buried inside you. And if there is one realization that changes everything, one idea, so powerful, it rearranges how you see yourself and your past, it is this: your anger was the voice of the part of you that refused to be erased. The child who said, "This isn't fair." The teenager who asked, "Why should I have to shrink to be loved?" The adult who wonders, "Why do I feel hollow in a room full of people?" That voice, raw, inconvenient, untamed, was right all along. It was never the part of you that needed fixing. It was the part of you that never forgot your wholeness. And here is the paradox. The moment you fully accept your anger, it begins to dissolve. Not because it's no longer needed, but because it has delivered its message. Like a loyal guard dog that barks to warn you of an intruder, your anger only bites when it's ignored. But when heard, when truly listened to it, softens. It steps aside. That ends with the key. And behind that key is your real power. The power to say no more. The power to walk away. The power to create rather than conform. The power to speak, even when your voice trembles. The power to protect. The parts of you that were once unguarded. Most people live their whole lives never touching this kind of power. They chase motivation. They build habits. They read self-help books and practice morning routines and repeat affirmations never, realizing that the energy they've been seeking was buried in the one emotion they were taught to suppress. Not fear, not sadness, but anger. Because anger is the bridge, between who you've been and who you are becoming. Between compliance and courage. Between surviving and actually living. And once you cross that bridge, once you stop fearing your own fury, you become someone new, not harder, not cold, but clearer. You love more fiercely. You laugh more fully. You show up without the mask, because you no longer need to hide your boundaries to be loved. You stop abandoning yourself to belong. And that, more than anything, is the mark of someone who has mastered their fire. Not that they never get angry, but that they know how to wield it with precision, with truth, with fierce compassion. Because here's the final, most sacred revelation. Your anger is not here to destroy others. It's here to protect you, It is your immune system of the soul, It rushes in when something toxic has entered your emotional body, It says, this is not who I am. It says, this is not the life I was meant to live. It says, I will no longer betray myself to make others comfortable. And when you honor that, when you finally let yourself feel the full heat of that righteous fire, you don't just transform. You return to your body, to your voice, to yourself, no longer splintered, no longer silent, no longer afraid of the very thing that was always trying to save you. And so, the question is no longer, how do I control my anger? The real question is, what truth have I been avoiding that only my anger has been willing to speak? Because once you hear that truth, you will never go back to sleep. You will become dangerous, to systems that rely on your silence, to people who only love the version of you that never pushed back, to patterns that demanded your compliance in exchange for belonging. But most of all, you will become dangerous to the lie that said your softness required your silence. Because now, you know better, you are not just light, you are fire. And fire does not ask permission to burn.